Verstappen shocks McLaren as he takes an amazing pole. Ferrari's downfall needs to be studied, and Carlos makes a huge statement about F1. What just happened at the Circuit of the Americas could completely change everything we thought we knew about the 2025 Formula One Championship battle. The sprint qualifying results from the United States Grand Prix have delivered some absolutely shocking twists that nobody saw coming, and if you're not paying attention right now, you're about to miss one of the most dramatic turning points in recent F1 history. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into the chaos that unfolded during sprint qualifying at COTA. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because things are moving incredibly fast in Formula One right now and you don't want to miss a single update. So here's what happened that has the entire paddock buzzing. We walked into this weekend knowing that Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are leading the championship fight, but what nobody expected was the absolute roller coaster that sprint qualifying would deliver. The tension was palpable from the moment the session began, and by the end, several championship contenders found themselves in positions that could make or break their title hopes. Let me paint you the picture of how this all unfolded. Sprint qualifying 1 kicked off with both championship leaders taking a strategic approach. Instead of immediately hitting the track like most drivers do, Piastri and Norris waited, watching as the rest of the field went out first. This tactical decision would prove crucial as track conditions evolved throughout the session. The drama started early when Gabriel Bortoleto became the first casualty of the session. His lap time got deleted due to track limits violations. But what made this particularly interesting was his radio message about being caught out by massive wind gusts. This wasn't just a simple mistake. Mother Nature was playing a significant role in determining who would advance. Then things got really interesting with the Red Bull situation. While Max Verstappen was flying at the top of the timing sheets, setting the pace as he often does, his teammate Yuki Tsunoda was struggling badly. Tsunoda actually radioed his team to say he didn't think he'd make it through to the next session. And guess what? He was right. But here's where the story gets absolutely wild. Traffic became a massive factor, completely bunching up the field and preventing several promising drivers from getting clean laps. The result? Some major names got knocked out in the first session that nobody expected to see eliminated so early. Oliver Behrman, who's been having such a strong season, found himself unable to progress. Franco Colapinto, another driver who's been turning heads with his performances, also got caught up in the traffic chaos. Esteban Ocon and Bortoleto joined them on the sidelines, creating a shuffled grid that immediately changed the dynamics for the rest of qualifying. Moving into sprint qualifying 2, you could feel the desperation from drivers who had barely squeaked through from the first session. Everyone was determined to avoid the traffic nightmare that had claimed so many victims earlier. Max Verstappen once again showed his class by setting the early pace, but then Lando Norris made his move. The McLaren driver launched himself to the top of the timing sheets, sending a clear message that he wasn't going to let this championship opportunity slip away easily. The Ferrari situation became absolutely nail-biting to watch. Both Charles Leclerc and his teammate were right on the bubble, barely managing to secure their spots in the final qualifying session. For a team with championship ambitions, having to fight just to make it to the top 10 shootout was not the position they wanted to be in. Meanwhile, Nico Hülkenberg pulled off something special, snagging what would be his best qualifying position of the entire season. It's moments like these that remind us why Formula One is so unpredictable and why every session matters. But the casualties in the second session tell their own story. Kimi Antonelli, who's been under intense scrutiny all season, couldn't find the pace when it mattered most. Isaac Hadjar, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, and Liam Lawson all found themselves knocked out, creating opportunities for others while crushing their own sprint race hopes. What makes these results so significant goes beyond just grid positions for tomorrow's sprint race. We're in the middle of a championship battle where every single point matters, and starting positions can make the difference between scoring big or going home empty-handed. The psychological impact cannot be understated either. When you see drivers like Norris finding speed when the pressure is highest, while others crack under the intensity, it reveals character traits that could prove decisive as this title fight reaches its climax. Looking at the bigger picture, These qualifying results have set up what could be an absolutely explosive sprint race. With the championship leaders positioned differently than expected, and several surprise performers finding themselves in strong positions, we could witness some incredible battles tomorrow. The track conditions at COTA, combined with the unpredictable wind patterns that affected so many drivers, mean that strategy will play a huge role in the sprint race. Teams that can adapt quickly to changing conditions will have a massive advantage. What's particularly fascinating is how this weekend demonstrates that in modern Formula One, you can never take anything for granted. Drivers and teams that looked dominant just weeks ago found themselves struggling, while others seized the moment to shine when it mattered most. The implications for the championship are enormous. Every position gained or lost in qualifying translates directly to potential points in the sprint race. And with the title fight as close as it is, these moments could define who becomes world champion. As we head into tomorrow's sprint race, one thing is certain. This United States Grand Prix weekend has already delivered more drama than most people expected, and we're just getting started. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because you won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible championship battle. Did Carlos Sainz just accidentally start the biggest Formula One controversy of the year with one simple comment about girlfriends? Because what happened next will shock you. Picture this. You're one of the fastest drivers on the planet, racing at over 200 miles per hour through the neon-lit streets of Singapore, pulling off incredible overtakes and defensive moves that take years to master. But when you turn on the TV broadcast later, what do you see? Cut after cut to reaction shots from the garage, while the real action happens off-screen. That's exactly what set Carlos Sainz off after the Singapore Grand Prix, and his response has sent shockwaves through the entire Formula One community. Now, Sainz isn't known for holding back his opinions, but even he probably didn't expect what came next when he criticized the Singapore broadcast for focusing too much on drivers' partners instead of the on-track racing. The Spanish driver unleashed a scathing assessment that immediately went viral worldwide, but here's where things get really interesting. He's now walking back parts of his comments while doubling down on others. Let me break down exactly what happened and why this matters so much more than you might think. During the Singapore Grand Prix, the television coverage made at least 16 separate cuts away from the actual racing to show reaction shots from mechanics, family members, and yes, drivers' girlfriends and partners. 16 times during a race where overtaking is notoriously difficult and every moment of wheel-to-wheel action is precious. That's what triggered Sainz's initial outburst. But here's what makes this story fascinating. Sainz has now admitted that his comments were blown out of proportion, specifically because he mentioned the girlfriends aspect. He revealed that using terms like wags, wives and girlfriends, added what he called spiciness to his critique and made it go viral in ways he never intended. This is a masterclass in how one-word choice can completely change the narrative around a story. The 31-year-old driver is now trying to thread the needle between standing by his core criticism while softening the parts that created the biggest controversy. He's comparing his critique to how his own performance gets analyzed, saying that just like he has good weekends and bad weekends as a driver, the broadcast team had an off day in Singapore. It's a surprisingly diplomatic approach from someone who initially came out swinging. What's really revealing is how Sainz clarified his actual problem with the coverage upon reflection. He admitted that the girlfriends and partners weren't actually shown too much. Instead, the real issue was the broadcast's obsessive focus on the frontrunners, particularly Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, even when there was clearly no action happening between them. The cameras kept cutting to these static shots of the leaders expecting drama that never materialized, while potentially missing real battles further down the field. This raises a crucial question about modern Formula One broadcasting that goes way beyond this single incident. Are we prioritizing storylines and personalities over pure racing action? The Singapore Grand Prix is one of the most challenging circuits on the calendar for overtaking, which makes every genuine racing moment incredibly valuable. When the broadcast misses these moments in favor of reaction shots or focusing on non-events at the front, it fundamentally changes how fans experience the sport. Think about it from a fan's perspective. You're staying up late or waking up early to watch these incredible athletes push themselves and their machines to the absolute limit. You want to see every defensive move, every late-breaking attempt, every moment where someone gains or loses a position through skill and strategy. Instead, you get 16 cuts to people sitting in garages watching the same race you're trying to watch. Sainz's backtrack reveals something interesting about the current media landscape in Formula One. He's clearly worried that his comments might have been taken personally by the broadcast team, emphasizing that it was just a simple critique of one specific race weekend. This suggests there's real sensitivity around these issues within the paddock, and drivers have to be incredibly careful about how they phrase their criticisms. The timing of this controversy is also significant. Formula One is experiencing unprecedented global growth, with new fans tuning in every weekend. The way races are broadcast plays a huge role in whether these new viewers stick around or decide the sport isn't for them. If someone's first Formula One experience is a broadcast that cuts away from actual racing 16 times in one race, what impression does that leave? What makes Sainz's position even more interesting is that he's not calling for a complete overhaul of Formula One broadcasting. He specifically mentioned that other races feature incredible coverage that showcases amazing track action. This suggests the problem isn't systematic, but rather specific to certain race weekends, or perhaps certain broadcast directors making questionable choices in the heat of the moment. The broader implications here extend beyond just television coverage. This controversy highlights the ongoing tension in Formula One between showcasing the sport as pure competition versus presenting it as entertainment and lifestyle content. Both elements have their place, but finding the right balance is clearly an ongoing challenge. Carlos Sainz may have started this conversation with a comment he now wishes he'd phrased differently, but he's opened up an important dialogue about what Formula One broadcasting should prioritize. Whether this leads to any actual changes in how races are covered remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: fans are paying attention, and they want to see the racing that made them fall in love with this sport in the first place. Hold up. What if I told you that one of the most important elections in motorsport history just became a complete sham? That's exactly what's happening right now with the FIA presidential race, and the implications are absolutely massive for Formula One and motorsport as we know it. I'm talking about Tim Mayer, the American executive who was supposed to challenge Mohammed bin Sulayem for the FIA presidency. Just days ago, Mayer dropped a bombshell statement that has sent shockwaves through the motorsport world. He declared the election over before it even began, calling the entire process nothing more than theater. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about one election going wrong. This is about how power structures in motorsport can be manipulated to ensure certain outcomes and what that means for the future of racing. Let me break down exactly what happened here, because this story is way more complex and concerning than it first appears. Back in July, Tim Mayer became the first person to announce he would challenge bin Sulayem for the FIA presidency. His campaign, called FIA Forward, promised reforms, fairness, and a return to democratic principles within the organization. Two other candidates, Laura Villars and Virginie Philippot, also threw their hats into the ring. On paper, this looked like it would be a competitive election with real choices for FIA members. But then the system itself began working against these challengers in ways that seem almost designed to prevent competition. Here's where the story takes a darker turn. To become an official candidate for FIA president, you need to submit what's called a presidential list. Think of it like a cabinet that includes vice presidents from different regions around the world: Middle East and North Africa, Africa, North America, South America, Asia Pacific, and 2 from Europe. But here's the catch, and this is crucial. These vice presidents can only be chosen from people who have nominated themselves for the World Motorsport Council and who have international events on the FIA calendar. Sounds reasonable, right? Until you realize what happened next. When nominations closed for the World Motorsport Council, something extraordinary occurred. In South America, only one person put themselves forward: Fabiana Ecclestone. Just one person for an entire continent. That person immediately declared support for bin Sulayem. This created an impossible situation for the challengers. Since Ecclestone was already on bin Sulayem's team, none of the other candidates could complete their presidential lists. Without a complete list, they can't even get on the ballot. But it gets worse. Mayer revealed that in the previous election cycle, over 40 candidates came forward for the World Motorsport Council. This time, only 29. That's a massive drop in participation. Mayer asked the question that should terrify anyone who cares about democratic processes. Did member clubs suddenly lose interest in shaping motorsport? Or were they persuaded, pressured, or promised something not to participate? Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a systematic reduction in candidates that just happens to benefit the incumbent president. The timing is suspiciously convenient. The situation in Africa is equally concerning. Out of 22 clubs across 47 nations, only 2 candidates emerged, both declared supporters of Ben Sulayem. One of them, Rodrigo Rocha, was apparently permitted to run because of an esports event that was quietly added to the international calendar last month. Here's the kicker. That event was scheduled for last weekend, but appears to never have actually taken place. It's not even listed on his own club's calendar or social media. This mirrors what happened when Rocha stood as a candidate previously. An event was put on the calendar, but never actually held. Mayer's response to all this was devastating. When elections are decided before ballots are even cast, that's not democracy, that's theater. And when member clubs are left with no real choice, they become spectators, not participants. The FIA's response was predictably bureaucratic. They claimed the election process is structured and democratic, pointing to publicly available statutes and regulations. But that completely misses the point. Having rules doesn't make a process democratic if those rules can be manipulated to prevent competition. What makes this story even more compelling is that Mayer isn't giving up. Even though he can't get on the ballot, he's taking his complaints through the FIA's internal ethics process. He's filed multiple ethics complaints, alleging violations throughout the election process. But here's another problem. If the ethics committee finds validity to these complaints, who do they report to? The president of the FIA or the Senate president? Both are conflicted parties. There's no independent oversight, no appeal process. As Mayer put it, this is how institutions fail, and this is power without brakes. The deeper issue here goes beyond just this election. Mayer revealed that many member clubs told him they wanted to speak out but couldn't. They fear losing projects, funding, or recognition if they question the system. That's not the sign of a healthy democratic organization. This has massive implications for Formula One and motorsport in general. The FIA president has enormous influence over how racing is governed globally, from safety regulations to technical rules to how revenue is distributed. If the election process for this position can be manipulated to prevent real competition, what does that say about the integrity of the entire system? What's particularly interesting is Mayer's confidence about his chances if he had been able to make it onto the ballot. When asked if he could have won, he smiled and said he would have had a very good chance. He described how, when he explained his ideas to people and told them they had an opportunity to cast an independent ballot, he could see the recognition in their eyes. That reaction, according to Mayer, is exactly why it suited certain parties to stop the process at this point. There was a real risk to the incumbent if a genuine election had taken place. The timing of all this is also significant. We're in an era where Formula One is experiencing unprecedented global growth, with new races, massive television audiences, and incredible commercial success. The governance of this sport matters more than ever. Yet here we have a situation where the organization responsible for that governance appears to be operating more like a closed club than a transparent democratic body. The implications extend far beyond just who sits in the president's chair. This story also highlights the complex power dynamics within international motorsport. The FIA isn't just about Formula One. It oversees motorsport globally and has significant influence over mobility and automotive issues worldwide. The concentration of power in the hands of a few, with limited democratic oversight, should concern anyone who cares about how these decisions are made. Looking ahead, the official election is still scheduled for December in Uzbekistan, but as Mayer pointed out, with only one candidate able to make it onto the ballot, it's not really an election at all. It's a coronation. The broader question this raises is about institutional integrity in motorsport. If governing bodies can manipulate their own election processes to ensure predetermined outcomes, what confidence can we have in their other decisions? From technical regulations to safety standards to commercial arrangements, the FIA makes decisions that affect millions of motorsport fans and participants worldwide. Mayer's decision to continue his campaign despite being unable to get on the ballot is significant. He's essentially saying that the principles he was fighting for, fairness, transparency, democratic governance, are more important than the election itself. His campaign has become about institutional reform rather than personal ambition. This situation should serve as a wake-up call for anyone involved in motorsport, whether as fans, participants, or industry professionals. The health of our sport's governing institutions matters enormously for its long-term future. The fact that we're seeing this level of controversy and these allegations of manipulation in such a high-profile election suggests deeper systemic problems that need addressing. The question now is whether enough people care about democratic governance in motorsport to demand change, or whether this will simply become another example of power protecting itself through procedural manipulation. What happens next could determine not just who leads the FIA, but what kind of organization it becomes and how motorsport is governed for years to come. What happens when teammates collide and one of them has to pay the price? Today we're diving into the explosive aftermath of a McLaren incident that sent shockwaves through the Formula One paddock and left one driver facing serious consequences behind closed doors. Picture this: Singapore Grand Prix, Lap 1, lights out. Two Papaya cars racing wheel to wheel when suddenly contact occurs, sparks fly, and what should have been a perfect start for McLaren becomes a nightmare scenario that would haunt the team for weeks to come. The incident itself happened in a flash. Lando Norris spotted an opportunity, a tiny gap left open by his teammate Oscar Piastri at the race start. In that split-second decision that separates champions from the rest, Norris went for it. But racing at 300 kilometers per hour leaves no room for error. After making contact with Max Verstappen's rear wing, Norris found himself careering into the side of Piastri's McLaren. The immediate aftermath was telling. While Norris accelerated away from the scene, Piastri's voice crackled over team radio with barely contained frustration. His words cut through the engine noise like a knife through butter, asking whether McLaren was okay with Lando simply barging him out of the way. The radio silence from the pit wall spoke volumes about the awkward position the team found themselves in. Here's where it gets interesting. Despite Piastri's obvious anger and his description of the move as completely unfair, McLaren chose not to intervene during the race. They watched as their two championship contenders sorted out their differences on track, with Norris maintaining his position and Piastri left to deal with the consequences of what he clearly saw as aggressive driving from his teammate. By the time the checkered flag waved, both drivers had secured podium positions. Third and fourth place helped McLaren clinch their second consecutive Constructors' Championship. But behind the celebrations, everyone knew an intense reckoning was coming. What happened next reveals the true nature of modern Formula One team dynamics. While team boss Andrea Stella maintained diplomatic silence in public, refusing to point fingers or assign blame to either driver, the real conversations were happening away from the media spotlight. These weren't casual debriefs about racing incidents. These were serious discussions about accountability, consequences, and the future of how McLaren's drivers would compete against each other. Oscar Piastri later revealed that extensive talks had taken place following the incident. His measured words carried weight. The team had made it crystal clear that the Singapore incident wasn't how they wanted their drivers to race each other. More significantly, he confirmed that Norris had accepted full responsibility for what happened, and the team had backed that assessment completely. When reporters pressed Norris about potential repercussions for his actions, his initial response was blunt and defensive. He made it clear that internal team matters weren't media business. But as the questions continued, a more revealing picture emerged. Norris admitted that McLaren had held him accountable for the contact, describing their decision as fair and acknowledging that serious talks about consequences had taken place. The most striking aspect of Norris's admission wasn't just that he accepted responsibility. but his recognition of why the team felt compelled to act. He acknowledged that both drivers were equally at risk during the incident, whether racing against teammates or competitors. This wasn't just about protecting Oscar Piastri. It was about preserving both championship campaigns and maintaining team harmony during their most successful period in years. What makes this situation particularly complex is McLaren's internal rulebook, known as the Papaya Rules. These guidelines specifically govern how Norris and Piastri should race each other, with the primary objective being to avoid any contact between their cars. The Singapore incident represented a clear violation of these established protocols, regardless of racing stewards' decisions or external opinions about the move's legitimacy. Norris emphasized that avoiding contact had been one of his greatest strengths throughout his Formula One career. He prided himself on keeping his car intact and finishing races, making the Singapore incident even more out of character. Yet he also made it clear that he would never pass up a racing opportunity when it presented itself. The gap was there, he went for it, and while he regretted the contact, he didn't regret the decision to attempt the overtake. The broader context makes this internal discipline even more significant. McLaren currently finds itself managing a delicate championship battle between two drivers of similar age, both chasing their first world titles. Piastri holds a 22-point advantage over Norris as the season enters its final phase, with Max Verstappen lurking 63 points behind as a potential dark horse candidate. Managing this intra-team rivalry without showing favoritism has become one of McLaren's biggest challenges this season. Previous incidents, including a clash in Canada where Norris eliminated himself while attempting to pass Piastri, have required similar internal discussions. However, Norris's immediate acceptance of responsibility in Canada helped prevent that situation from escalating into lasting tension. Andrea Stella's leadership approach has been crucial in maintaining team harmony throughout these challenging moments. According to Norris, Stella's primary focus remains preserving the positive teamwork that has transformed McLaren from backmarkers to championship contenders. The team principal recognizes that repercussions aren't always positive, but he's committed to maintaining the collaborative framework that has driven their recent success. This framework has allowed McLaren to avoid the toxic dynamics that have destroyed other teams when teammates battle for championships. Norris specifically referenced the infamous Hamilton-Rosberg rivalry at Mercedes, which ultimately contributed to Rosberg's retirement from Formula One after winning his championship. The secrecy surrounding Norris's specific consequences has only added to the intrigue. When pressed for details about his punishment, Norris remained tight-lipped, confirming only that consequences exist while refusing to elaborate on their nature. This approach suggests McLaren is handling the situation with the seriousness it deserves while keeping sensitive details away from public scrutiny. What we're witnessing is a masterclass in modern team management during high-pressure championship battles. McLaren's ability to hold their star driver accountable while maintaining team unity could determine whether they successfully navigate the remaining races without imploding under pressure. The Singapore incident and its aftermath demonstrate that even the most successful teams must sometimes make difficult decisions to preserve their long-term goals. By holding Norris accountable despite his championship ambitions, McLaren has sent a clear message about their priorities and values. As this championship battle intensifies, how McLaren continues managing these internal dynamics could ultimately determine who wins their first world title and whether the team can maintain the harmony that has driven their remarkable resurgence in Formula One.